Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Groovy Podcast. My name is Ken Cousin. I'm podcasting from Marlborough, Connecticut. I am joined by a couple of wonderful guests. One is, okay, let's see if I pronounce this right. So Schalk, and then how do you say Cronjé?
Cronjé.
Cronjé? Very good. It's got an E with a little accent on it, right?
Yes.
I think I'm even going to actually put that correctly in the show notes. That's good. And where are you broadcasting from?
Oh, I'm currently based in Rinsal in Andorra.
Rinsal, Andorra. For those people who don't have Google Maps handy, that's the Pyrenees, right? It's in the Pyrenees between France and Spain?
That's correct, yes. The Principality of Andorra is situated there.
And periodically... Sorry, what was that?
It's a very beautiful country.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, periodically you tweet a picture out your window or something, and it's just dazzling. You know, it's absolutely beautiful there. You recently relocated there from the UK, right? Or was it from South Africa?
No, from the UK.
And you relocated to the UK from South Africa?
That's correct, yes. I've been to different parts of the world by now.
You are quite the world traveler. We also are joined by excellent person, Sergio. Let's see if I say it right. Sergio Delamo. Is that good?
Sergio Delamo, yes. Hello, Ken.
You are broadcasting from?
Guadalajara. There is a Mexico City with the same name, but this one is close to Madrid in Spain, in the center of Spain, 50 kilometers away from Madrid.
I'm going to have to get the spelling on that because I put Madrid in the show notes, so I guess that's not quite right.
It's fine.
Oh, okay. Sergio plays several roles in the Groovy community, one of which is that you're one of the chief organizers of the Greach conference, right?
No, I am not.
No,
I am not. I collaborate with them with the mobile apps, but the Greach conference is organized by Ivan Lopez and Alberto Vinces.
Of course. Yeah, I thought you two did it together. I didn't realize that was
no, I don't.
Was primarily him. Well, sorry for Ivan. Maybe we'll have to have him on as a guest in the future. But you were there at the conference, right? It was a big deal.
Yes, I was there. I am visiting Greach, I think, for the past 5 years I have been there. Mm-hmm. It's really handy for me because it's like half an hour with the car from where I live. So it's like the perfect conference for me.
Wonderful. I know that you are also currently working with OCI these days, right?
Yeah, since January.
And you've been doing a lot of work with their Getting Started guides. I'm sure there's some other things you're doing with them as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And if I remember correctly, weren't you working on in the mobile world before that?
Yeah, I was working in a startup. We were doing a mobile application, both iOS and Android. Also with Grails backend, but yes, I was in the mobile development world.
With a Grails backend, that's right. I do remember that. We talked about that. I think it was at Great Conf in Copenhagen last year.
I think so.
Right, which was very interesting. So we'll get back to all that. We'll definitely talk about that. I should at least identify right off the top that conspicuous by his absence is our good friend, well, our good acquaintance, Baruch Sadagurski, who would normally be podcasting with us from California. Sadly, as we put in a tweet storm this morning, Baruch recently gave a presentation at a conference, and he presented on Kotlin puzzlers, and that was just simply too much, and he has therefore been banned for life from the Groovy Podcast. It is sad. It's a very unfortunate, but not a total surprise, I would think. And we'll have to. One of the things we'll need to discuss during this podcast is if there's any chance at retribution, if there's any penance that he can do, or some way that he can, re-justify his rejoining the podcast, as unlikely as that may be. Okay. So we will see how that goes. Now, in the meantime, let me just do some basic news, and then we can talk about the things that you did at Greach, or the things that you're doing now as well. Now, I don't have a lot in the show notes at the moment. Let me mention a couple things that are unrelated to any of us directly. First of all, someone named Lucas Teixeira. Do you know him? Teixeira. Ring any bells?
No.
He wrote a extensive, interesting blog post about multi-tenancy with Grails.
I saw the blog post, yes.
Yeah, so the multi-tenancy post talked about the multi-tenant core plugin and a single database plugin and how to do it yourself and you know, all kinds of stuff. It's a very extensive post, and I put it in, or I will put it in the show notes. Looks very interesting. You ever done anything with multi-tenancy with Grails?
I have not, but there is a lot of good multi-tenancy support in the latest GORM. Yesterday, GORM 6.1 was released.
Right.
There is like really good capabilities there. So basically, for those who don't know what multi-tenancy is, which I included myself 2 weeks ago. So whenever you are thinking like about software as a service, for example, where you will have like the same Grails app with a different database per client, something like that, you could use like a multi-tenancy there. So GORM supports like, I think you can have like per database or per schema, or I think per column. I think you can have like a column to differentiate, but for sure per schema and per database, those are options already in GORM. I haven't read the post that you mentioned, but there are really good capabilities for multi-tenancy in Grails.
And I do thank you for the reminder that this was part of GORM 6.1. GORM 6.1 went GA according to the OCI blog post back on 27 March. But didn't they just release, what was it, 6.1.1 or something?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's not a blog post that I could find associated with that. But
I think there should be a tweet in the Grails framework Twitter account.
Yeah, I'll have to go find the tweet. But I mean, it's just it's not an extensive change to 6.1. I mean, it's still basically bug fixes related to 6.1, right?
No, 6.1 is big.
Yes.
There are like.
But the 6.1.1 isn't a big change from 6.1.
Correct.
At least that's the impression I get. Is 6.1 bundled into the latest version of Grails 3?
Well, GORM is completely decoupled. So you can basically, in the latest Grails version, when you create an app, you will have in your Gradle.properties, you will have like the GORM version you can use.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just choose the GORM implementation that you use. If you choose like Hibernate, that's the GORM implementation we are all used to. So you can use the latest GORM version in Grails 3.8, basically. So it will basically mean to change the GORM version in the Gradle.properties file.
Or is it in Gradle.properties, or is it directly in the build.gradle file? Probably in Gradle.properties. I'm sure you're right.
In Gradle.properties because it's referenced from the main build.gradle file.
Okay.
But yeah.
And that's
fascinating. You are in previous, the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glancing at the blog post again, just a reminder that they have the GORM data services now to let you define interfaces and abstract classes that are automatically implemented for you at compile time. Of course, they mentioned the multi-tenancy AST transformations, support for JPA annotations and bean validation API, package scanning for easier unit testing, and then support for the latest versions of several different drivers, including Hibernate 3.2. By the way, one of the neat things in Hibernate 3.2 and above is they have added support for the java.time package. So that if you're on Java 8 and you want to use local date, local time, local date time, things like that, now Hibernate has native support for attributes of that type. Used to be you had to write your own attribute mappers to make that work. So that's nice. They've got support for MongoDB, Neo4j, all the usual suspects. And there's a link to a talk in Madrid, and it says my talk. Let's see, who's that link to? That is, Graham, of course. Graham Roche, yes, of course. Which is a nice, and by the way, they do have a little snippet there in Gradle.properties. You just say GORM version equals, and there it is exactly. So yeah, I'll definitely put a link to the OCI team blog in the show notes. But as you mentioned, it was updated this morning with a late release of GORM as well.
Correct.
Okay, now in addition to that, what else do we have? I want to mention, because the deadline is going quickly, the Great Ladies group, GR8 Ladies group, is also awarding conference tickets and travel grants. They have a form there that you could complete, and the application will close on April 15th, and the recipients will be chosen before May 1st. That will give you 2 tickets for GreatConf in Copenhagen this year, specially designated for members of an underrepresented group or students. Let's see, anything else that I need to point out here? They have a little bit of funding designed for recipients of the diversity ticket that would cover a flight from any major airport in Europe and a basic hotel room in Copenhagen, which is not simple. Copenhagen's an expensive city, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yes. So at any rate, I put a link, or I will put a link in the show notes to that form in case anybody is interested in that or knows somebody who could use the assistance like that. Another tweet that came out this morning came from Daniel's son. I don't know whether it's son or soon. We'll have to get in touch with him and find out exactly how to pronounce his last name, who is a core team member of Groovy. And he announced that the Parrot parser is now actually merged into main, interestingly enough.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Pardon me?
I didn't know that. I didn't know you had that.
Yeah, I mean, that came out this morning. So I don't know whether that means that all future Grails versions will use that, or if it's specifically targeted at a particular version of Grails. I'm sure somebody will mention in the show notes there, but or actually somebody will mention it on Twitter or something like that. But I did notice the tweet that said it's official, and that's really significant. I mean, that gives us our real Java 8 support. That has additional annotations. Have you played with that at all, the Parrot parser?
No, I haven't.
Schalk, have you done anything with that yet?
No, I haven't, but there was a lot of noise about it at the Greach conference. And
I remember that.
And they have definitely very happy with it.
I only saw the tweets, of course, but I saw there was a lot of excitement about that, and I do believe that gives us native Lambda syntax from Java 8. I did see a tweet last week where they pointed out there's now an @GroovyDoc annotation that you could add as well that is supported by the parser, so that you could put in things that go directly to the Groovy docs as well. As a matter of fact, that's the link I have at the moment. But I'm sure we'll have a lot more to say about the Parrot parser in future podcasts when that becomes part of the release. But anyway, I wanted to mention it. The other thing another one that I have here is that the HTTP NG group, the HTTP builder NG for next generation, there was a major presentation at Greach on that.
Yeah, I think we got.
Yeah, by Noam Tene.
Yeah, really nice talk.
Did you get a chance to go to that?
Yeah, I attended the talk. It was really nice. I personally haven't used the HTTP builder ng. The concept seems really cool because you can use like different implementations. So if you have used a library such as OK HTTP, and he showcased a couple of other networking libraries that have been integrated as well. So it looks like kind of, for me, look like the concept of SLA4J. So basically, you decouple yourself of the implementation, and then you have like a nice DSL on top. It looks really nice.
Yeah, I've used it for one of my projects so far. The upgrade was really, really good.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
definitely. Noam did a very, very good presentation on it.
Yeah.
Well, I've got the link to the presentation, and of course, the homepage is a GitHub IO project. So it's just http-builder-ng.github.io. And they've, I know that I ran into a minor problem, which I'm sure was my fault when I tried to use it. But at any rate, they recently upgraded the user guide. And I'm going to give that, as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to read through that and get a chance to try to use it again. I probably had just some weird issue myself with it, but it's very powerful, and the upgrade to the user guide gives far more complete examples as well. So I hope that people get a chance to check that out, really like that. The slides were posted on SlideShare by Noam Tene's presentation, and I thought he was a major contributor, but it turns out he was just giving the talk. I don't remember who the actual people are behind the project?
The actual people behind the project, it's in a slide inside the presentation. So anyone who takes a look to the slides of Noam, the two authors are inside. I don't remember the names, but he credited them in the beginning of the talk.
Then I, after all, should simply just scroll through. And I did actually look at the presentation slides. Oh yeah, Chris Steno is involved. Stehno. He's the guy who also does the mock HTTP server, that special server as well. And David Clark, apparently, David W. Clark. Those are in there. And as you say, that supports HTTP under the hood and HTTP components and various other pieces. And it's simply installed with a simple dependency in your Gradle build file.
Yeah.
Okay, so those slides are available as well. What else? Speaking of Greach, of course, Sergio, you did a talk on Grails interview questions, which I found fascinating because it was very much a guided tour through some features that people may not pay attention to. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I wanted basically to give a talk about different Grails topics, and I didn't know how to bind them together, basically. And the interview questions format gave me an excuse, basically, to jump from one topic to the other. Yeah, I wanted basically, I mean, it's tough to get people with Grails experience. And it's really, yeah, basically I put together a couple of questions and answers which will allow to have a discussion with anyone, and you will quickly realize if they have experience using Grails or not. But as you said, basically it was more an excuse just to jump from topic to topic.
Yeah, well, I thought it was very, I mean, again, I just saw the slides, but I thought that was very effective. I thought that worked really well. I suppose it's bad for me to admit that I learned some things, but maybe that's not bad. I don't know. I'm supposed to know some of this stuff, but
that's the goal of the talk.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I went to Sergio's talk, and I actually learned a lot of things from there, and I thought it was very well pitched. So if somebody doesn't know much about Grails, I think that's a very good entry point.
Yeah, I liked it. I'm just skimming through it again now, and I thought it was really very interesting, a lot of it. So thank you for putting the slides on SlideShare, or on Speaker Deck, rather. And I assume that at some point the videos from Greach will be made available as well.
I think so. Normally they are pretty fast about the videos. So I will expect they will be probably available in the next month or so.
I have to make sure I remember to say this, so I'm going to say it now, even though it's kind of a non sequitur. For those people who are watching the YouTube video as opposed to listening to the audio podcast, Sergio does have on his Groovy Calamari t-shirt. That's another role that Sergio plays in the community, is he publishes the Groovy Calamari newsletter, which is fascinating. We do have a name for the one-eyed pink squid, right? Or do you still find
Ursula.
That? Ursula, right, is the name of the squid now. I think that's, well, great, I guess. I don't know. It's just, it was a running gag anyway. You just put out a new Groovy Calamari just this week, right? Or last week?
Yeah, last Monday.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it was in it, because I did read through it. I just didn't have a chance to follow all the links. Do you want to say something about it?
Basically about a couple of Gradle links. The whole composite build is something that is really interesting to me. I haven't personally used it, but I am reading about it. And then the other thing about the Gradle, I linked to another talk by Hans in a Ruby user group, where he talked about the incremental compilation that they are adding in the latest, which looks really nice. As you said previously, I have done some Android development in the past. The compilation there is probably the biggest pain point. So if they are able to really improve the speed of Android development and compilation there, it's like a really, really big win for them. And then I linked to a couple of a couple of blog posts about testing. We released a great guide about testing domain class constraints this week. So I am trying to target like some of the links with the guides that we publish every Monday. So that was more or less the topic, but a lot of Gradle. I try to link to Gradle stuff because it's something that I keep using myself a lot. And yeah.
Well, I thought it was great. And Schalk and we're going to talk a lot about Gradle in a few minutes. We'll get to that. But as long as, just to complete what you're talking about, since you also put out those Grails guides, one of the Grails guides that came out this week was the Spring Security Core plugin with custom authentication. Do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, basically the guide is a bit more advanced Grails guide this week. So normally when you install a Spring Security Core plugin, you have like username, password authentication.
Right.
But the plugin really allows for a big amount of flexibility. You can override a lot of beans and defines like custom authentication providers. So you can really extend or modify the plugin behavior to basically suit your authentication needs. So we created a guide which is like a simple example here in Spain. Normally the banks, when you want to sign into a bank, you normally have to enter a username, password, and then they ask you like for a coordinate. They tell you, give me the value of this for your coordinate card, like position number 77, which is the value, and then you check in your card and then you enter that. So it's like two-factor authentication, like something you know, something you have. So basically the example shows how to basically tweak the Spring Security Core plugin to create like a custom authenticator. Yeah, basically a bit more advanced, but I wanted basically to show that the Spring Security Core plugin, which is probably the most famous plugin in the ecosystem, allows for a really big degree of extension.
Well, that's very appreciated. I mean, as you say, the Spring Security Core plugin is probably the most installed plugin in the Grails ecosystem, very popular. And you're right, almost all the examples I've ever seen have been little hello world examples with a username and password. It's nice to see how you can customize the authentication and as a step on the way to two-factor authentication and other mechanisms like that. So I do encourage people in general to go visit the guides page, guides.grails.org, and there are many guides there. In fact, Gradle guides rather are very impressed with your page, and we are being, shall we say, heavily influenced by it. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. So I mean, very nice job, and thank you very much for that. Now, of course, what you mentioned was the release of Gradle, and in fact, Gradle upgraded its version this morning. Again, the final release of 3.5.0 came out this morning, and there are some very nice features in that, which I'm sure we'll be talking about over time. One of which is that the console is much more informative and animated and active. There's a lot more information that goes by to show multiple processes going on and everything. But of course, the biggest change is how much faster it is. Gradle's really improved the speed a lot, and some of that is due to the incremental builds part that you linked in the guide, and part is this new feature called the build cache. The build cache, which allows the results of previous tasks to be cached not just locally but also remotely, and therefore used by a series of members on the team as well. There's a link to the build cache user manual. We'll put a link to the show notes to the actual release information as well. And as I say, we'll talk about that a lot more in the future. But of course, as usual, everything is available on SDK Manager, sdkman.io. You can upgrade at any time. Now, Schalk, for those who don't know, has been active with the Gradle people for some time now, working with their guides as well. And also, Schalk is the author of a couple of their LeanPub books, right? They're on LeanPub?
Yes, they're all the idiomatic Gradle books for plugin authors. Right,
and that's the title, right? It's idiomatic Gradle what's the actual title? Let me get it right.
Normally, the title is idiomatic Gradle, and the subtitle would be something like 25 recipes for plugin authors.
Right.
So the first book is done. The second one is still being worked on.
The second one's still being worked on, which I managed to get in on because if you bought it early, you're right, you gave out some coupon or something.
That's great, but that's a wonderful thing about writing stuff on Leanpub. So people can buy a book early and then they just get updates for free afterwards.
Right, and I have the link here at Leanpub, and I will be sure to put that in the show notes. That's for the first one, and then, as you say, the second one is still under development. And anybody ever slide that you paid slider all the way to the right, you know, to pay you a maximum amount?
That would be nice.
Yeah, well, maybe that's what Baruch will have to do in order to get back in our good graces here, something like that, you know. But that is there. How did you like the experience, by the way, of writing for Leanpub? Did you like that?
Well, by default, Leanpub only uses Markdown or their own flavor of Markdown, which I don't really like. I tend to be a very big ASCII Doctor person.
Yeah, me too.
And then I started, well, I would like to write my book in ASCII Doctor. And so I ended up writing a backend for ASCII Doctor. So you can write an ASCII Doctor and actually convert it to the appropriate formats for Leanpub.
Wow.
And
I'm definitely interested in that because one of the things you can do with Leanpub books is you can publish them as Amazon ebooks as well.
Yes.
So that they don't mind, they don't object to that. It's an interesting little mechanism. Of course, by not going through a traditional publisher, you are making it a little bit more difficult for people to find you. But of course, you don't have the layer in between you and the readers there.
Yeah, that's correct. But the other advantage of Leanpub as well, especially with technology books, is that the tech can change so fast that a paper book can go out of print very quickly. And even with, for instance, the idiomatic Gradle books, every time a new version of Gradle comes out, I just pretty much update the script for the book and run it, and it actually checks the compatibility of the content of the book across all of the versions of Gradle till the latest one. So if there are any issues with the recipes, they just get updated and pushed out again, and people can get it. Which you simply can't do with a paper book.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's very, very helpful. So yeah, I hope this will encourage more people to take a look at it. And if they ever do adopt ASCII Doc, I imagine they'll get a lot more people interested as well. But if you've got a converter, I imagine the community may be interested at that at some point.
Yes.
Is it a Gradle plugin or is it just a backend script?
No, it's a backend for ASCII Doc. But pretty much what will happen is you can still use your Gradle script to build it, and you just have to include the extra backend. Actually, just have to be on your class path and automatically get picked up by ASCII Doctor.
Wow, I got to try this out. In the meantime, as part of your experience with writing plugins, you gave a workshop at Greach, right?
Yes, that's correct. And I actually wanted to focus on writing plugins in Groovy at that workshop. There's been a lot of talk in the Gradle community that people should write their plugins in Java for reasons of prior, let's say, disperformance of Groovy, and there's mistakes that were made, etc. I mean, I think most of Gradle core is now Java, if not everything is Java, which one of the parts I use to actually update the performance to get it to these levels. But so I wanted to focus on the fact of what should you actually do in Groovy to write decent plugins, and focusing on things like using compile static and a couple of other things as well. But obviously, we also wanted to get people into writing Gradle plugins, as the learning curve for that is still steep. I mean, it's a lot easier than Maven, for instance, or a couple of other things I've worked with. If you ever try to write a plugin or an extension to Gmake, then you will know what pain it is. So the way that Gradle does this just makes it so easy, but there's still a pretty steep learning curve, and things like that hopefully just help people out.
Well, I'm sure that's very appreciated. Glad that you did that. Did you do anything else, by the way, at the Greach conference? Anything else about the conference you want to comment on?
No, I just generally absolutely enjoyed it. I think even Alberto have been doing a brilliant job of all of the years. I mean, I think I've gone to 4 of the 6 Greaches by now, and it's still one of my favorite conferences. It's small, it's packed with Spanish hospitality, and just a lot of other things. And the tech content is just so good. And generally, always I just found that there are no, what do I say? I don't really know what the word is here, but generally everybody is down to earth, and they just get along, and it's easy to talk to people in between, and it was just great.
Wasn't there a workshop on the macro methods as well? The thing that that Sergey Egorov introduced as well?
Yes, he did. I didn't go to that, but there's a couple of other people that went to that, and it's been very, very well received.
I did go. I wrote my first AST.
What'd you think?
It's cool. It's cool. I mean, it was surprising because he has started the workshop with a really empty project. So we were all forced to type with him and write the AST ourselves, and then see the advantage of using the macro methods instead. I think it's really cool. I mean, for anyone writing ASTs, I think it's gonna be like a really good thing, because it's gonna save them a lot of time probably, and it's gonna make like code much smaller as well.
This was another feature that, of course, is supported by the new Parrot parser, right? So, I mean, did you use the new Parrot parser in order to make that work?
In order to make that work, we had to reference like a Groovy version directly from our build.gradle. I don't remember exactly the name of the thing that he used to, but the workshop is online. It's a GitHub repository. But basically, we had to use that specific version, and with that specific version, we had access to macro methods.
Well, I strongly suspect that once the Parrot parser becomes a regular part of Groovy, that I think that'll be just supported natively.
Probably, yeah.
I think that was one of the features. Again, I don't remember for sure, but that was my sense.
I think it's a good place. They also just wish Sergey well, because he just relocated to Germany.
Sergey relocated to Germany. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's always not an easy transition to go to a new country. So we just all want to wish him well.
Absolutely. Yes. Good luck to you. And he was a guest on the podcast some time ago. I think also we got I got a tweet this morning from Jen Strader as well, saying that I'd seen this before. What is it? The Berlin area Groovy and Grails user group or whatever is restarting. They're going to be active again. I wonder if that's all related. I have no idea.
And Sergey is relocating to Berlin as well.
Yes, and so is Jen. So
yeah, I know Jen was moving out there, and as well as Sergey. So yeah, that's definitely good to see that the community out there is restarting the user group and getting more interested. Of course, one thing we do have to mention is that, you know, one of the more controversial things that Gradle did last year is announced that they were going to have support for Kotlin, you know, especially that there's a lot of effort going on in the, what they call it, Gradle script Kotlin, I believe is the plugin there. And that will allow you potentially to write your build files in Kotlin as opposed to writing them in Groovy. And in the latest Gradle release, 3.5, I think they upgraded Gradle script Kotlin to 0.8 something. I expect that they're planning a 1.0 release around the Gradle Summit at the end of June. Is that your sense as well?
I am not actually quite sure. I really want to make a big announcement about it, and I sort of know things have been progressing. Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting to see how well it works.
Yeah, I don't know, because it's a different challenge, you know, to get Kotlin working in Gradle. Oh my goodness, I said the magic words, didn't I? We are now joined by. It's sort of like doing the whole, you know, Beetlejuice comment. I mentioned Kotlin 3 times, and who should appear but our friend Baruch Sadegorski, who we announced. You know, you've been banned. You know that, right?
Well, hello, Kotlin Con.
Oh my goodness! Just to finish that, we were mentioning how the latest release of Gradle now supports Kotlin script or Kotlin script Gradle, and there was actually one thing I wanted to mention on that. There's a Kotlin podcast, by the way, run by Hadi Hariri. and it's at talkingkotlin.com, and he did an interview recently with Rodrigo Oliveira, who is the person at Gradle working on Gradle script Kotlin. But at any rate, since we mentioned that, I guess now we have to bring up, poor Baruch, who actually did a Kotlin Puzzlers talk, didn't you?
Yes, and for my defense, there are a couple of things that I want to mention. First, I was in a Groovy T-shirt.
Oh,
I'm not sure if it can be shown on the pictures, but it was a Groovy T-shirt that I revealed in the middle of the puzzlers in the most embarrassing way to everybody. Yeah, so the second, every time a good feature of Kotlin was shown, I was screaming it was stolen from Groovy. And when it was not so good, I was screaming this was taken from Scala.
Even better.
And the third fact is I got a lot of feedbacks after the puzzlers that the people were considering Kotlin but won't do it anymore. So I think I did my job very well.
So what you're saying is that you participated, but you were quite subversive in doing so. You were a mole in the Kotlin community.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. No, it was actually a lot of fun, and it's an interesting language with interesting decisions. Some of them are pretty controversial, and some of them are extremely unusual. So the puzzlers were a lot of fun. People are. Were making assumptions which would be true in other languages, but not in Kotlin. So it was a lot of fun.
Was that recorded? I mean, I didn't see a video or anything related to that.
Yes, it was recorded. It was live streamed, which means the recording is available now, and we will add the link in the show notes. Although it was in Russian, but the code is code, so at least that should work. My jokes about Groovy and Scala will probably be harder to to get, but the puzzlers themselves are nice. Yep.
Well, that's good. And the show notes are being prepared. We don't have them all set up yet, so I'll put that document up. It'll be in the normal place in the GitHub repo, and we can add the link to the video there as well. I guess our only alternative would be to be the United Airlines of podcasts and just boot you out at this point. But no, I just don't have the heart. What do you think, guys? Should we let him stay?
Yeah, I just wonder whether we should change his name to Baruch now.
Yeah, and that, as we mentioned just now on Twitter, works in the assumption that J stands for Java, but as my dear friend Craig Berkey mentioned, it might also stand for Jackass.
Oh, geez. Well, remember, Craig is a huge Dane Cook fan, so you have to deal with that already. So don't worry.
Talking about a lot of fun with those guys, announcement that I'm not sure was already made public. Groovy Puzzlers are coming to GreatConf US. And that will be the drunk edition of the Groovy Puzzlers, which means that you already know the co-host of this talk.
Very good. Very good.
You can guess who that will be.
Now you'll be at GreatConf in Copenhagen as well, right?
No. A new member of our JFrog family, Michael Huterman, is going to join. He's coming from Germany, so it's a short trip for him. And I have other previous arrangements that I need to attend, like a vacation.
Really? Amazing.
Yeah. I don't know how that happened.
There was one other news item, by the way, that I thought I would bring up. I was waiting partly for Baruch to jump in on this because I imagine you have an opinion about it as well. There's a guy whose name I can't pronounce. His last name is Baeldung, so it looks like Beldung or whatever. I don't know. He is a very frequent blogger about assorted, Java-related guides, and of course he does a lot in the Spring community. Well, he had this little survey that he put up, and it was a quick and easy survey to say what what version of Java are you using? What version of Spring and Spring Boot? What about the IDEs? And then of course, what alternative JVM languages and build tools, among other things. And he got the results of that were announced. He says he got, unbelievably, over 40, almost 4,500 answers from that. A lot of data. Now, it is a somewhat self-selective group. It's the people who are aware of him and who follow him, and that's going to be heavily concentrated toward Java people, and especially those with a Spring interest. He's got his own courses, for example, on REST with Spring and Spring Security as well. The results, if you haven't seen them, is that Java 8 adoption is rapidly growing. That was up around 75% already. And Spring, everybody was on Spring 4, and now some people are already using the Spring 5 betas. Again, that's why I say somewhat self-selected group. Spring Boot was growing, and IntelliJ was bigger than Eclipse, but not nearly as big. I think, again, because the Spring community uses Spring Tool Suite in many ways, so not a surprise. But the two surprising ones, one was the JVM languages, where Groovy was up to 40%. It was by far the biggest of anything, followed by Scala at 28.5%, and then Kotlin at 11.5%, and everybody else was much smaller. But the part that I really didn't understand is that in the build tools section, Maven was up to 76%, and Gradle was only at about 18%. And everybody else was small fry. Beyond that, one of a big ant, believe it or not. I found it highly inconsistent that Groovy would be so widely adopted and Gradle so narrowly. My own personal explanation, of course I have no explanation, but my own feeling is that since this is a Spring community and a Spring Boot community, when you use the Spring initializer, by default it tends to use Maven. You have to ask it to use Gradle instead. So this huge adoption of Spring Boot is leading to a burst of Maven users, but I don't know if people are choosing to use Maven or that's just the default. Anything else you want to comment on about the whole thing?
I think that's very precise. And if the group that were working are Spring Boot users, it makes perfect sense. Dave Sire is a very big fan of Maven, so and Spring Boot is a very opinionated framework. So when you use Spring Boot, you actually use what Dave Sire wants you to use. So that will be, of course, Maven.
But of course, as Sergio would say, Grails 3 is on top of Spring Boot, and of course that's all driven by Gradle. So any increased adoption of Grails 3 will hopefully help that number.
Yeah, but that's another opinion on top of opinions of Spring Boot creators, right? You know what I mean? When you use Spring Boot, you get the opinions of Dave Sire. When you use Grails 3 on top of Spring Boot, you get the opinions of the Grails team, which of course might be different.
I was surprised, though, that among this self-selective group, Groovy had a 40% usage rate among the Java developers. Because the question was simply, are you using other JVM-based languages? And Groovy was leading the pack with, as he says, a strong 40%. That's way bigger than I would have expected, just because Groovy just tends to be quiet. People don't tend to talk about it that much.
So this, I don't see how the answers relate to the questions, because are you using other JVM languages should at least contain no, right?
No, okay. So you're saying... all right.
And it means that what we see here, this pie chart, is those who named another language.
Yeah,
so I would say if we put a no in the mix, it could be that we will have like 80% no, and those are the results of the remaining 20.
Oh no, he's got it right underneath. He says overall 50% of developers are only using Java, so that's less than 60. I mean, that's not too bad. So
here 57. Yeah. So what we see here are the results of the remaining 43, and out of those 40 use Groovy. So from the total amount of people, it's like what, like 20%, which makes sense. It's a good number for the JVM usage, and of course if you extrapolate it to all the developer community, add like 60% that don't use the JVM, and then you got into the numbers which are consistent with the other polls that we see, like Stack Overflow and others. So it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you for that. Of course, the big surprise there, if anything, is how much Kotlin has grown, because they passed Clojure on this. I mean, Clojure looks like it's almost an afterthought. It was only at 8%, 6%. It's a very small number. And then Ceylon, Ceylon. I've heard of it. I've never done anything with Ceylon.
That's a language.
Yeah, it's a Red Hat language, if you could put it this way. Pretty much driven out of Barcelona to some extent, if I could put it. But there's a lot of guys working on it. I've actually been working with those guys, helping them to convert their build from Ant to Gradle.
Someone except of Gavin actually works on Ceylon?
Yes,
I was pretty sure it's a one-man show.
Not if you sit on the Gitter group for Ceylon. It is pretty busy.
Nice. Okay, good to know. And regarding Kotlin, well, now I have explanation to any hype around Kotlin. It turns out that it's a name of a very popular ketchup brand in Poland.
Yes.
Right? So now we know how to explain any rise in any polls or statistics around Kotlin. It's just people mistakenly answer about ketchup.
Yeah, somebody put up a blog post where they had interest, and all they had put in on Google interest was Groovy and Kotlin. And I'm thinking, you know how difficult it is to search on Groovy and not get everything that's other than the programming language? You know what I mean? I mean, you get tons of stuff there. So, I mean, Kotlin, yeah, that was the interesting discovery from that, is that it's a popular ketchup brand in Poland. Go figure.
and now it explains another very interesting phenomenon that I kept wondering about: why every tweet about Kotlin written in plain English is suggested to be translated from Polish by Twitter.
Okay. Very good.
And now everything makes sense.
Well, I believe that's pretty much everything I had. I went through a whole series of newsy related things, but not a ton of stuff. And Schalk and Sergio were kind enough to cover a lot of that information. That'll all go in the show notes. Is there anything that any of you have that you would like to bring up or mention at this point?
No, I'll just say goodbye, auf Wiedersehen, adios, adeo, salugashle, and tot ziens.
See, I'm an American.
Wow.
I know one language. You know, it's the old Bruce Willis line from Fifth Element. I know two languages, English and bad English. So, you know.
No, but now we have this part recorded, and we can just amend it to every episode in the end.
Very good. And Sergio, thank you very much for coming. You're just still working with the guides? Anything else going on with you these days?
Yeah, basically we publish a guide every Monday. So make sure to visit guides.grails.org every Monday. I publish the Groovy Calamari every weekend, so be sure to subscribe there as well. And yeah, that's basically it. Thank you guys. Keep doing the podcast. I have been listening to the podcast for a long time. So I hope you keep doing it. And
of course, you should listen. All these podcasts only exist because of Groovy Calamari. Basically, what we do, we read out loud the news from there.
Yeah, I curate Mr. Hacky blog, and then you.
Yeah, that actually underrates the influence of the what is it? The other one that we read from as well.
Grails
Diary.
Yeah, the Grails Diary. Right. Because we got and I didn't put that together this time. So, and for the next podcast, we'll just read from that one, you know. And by the way, are you anywhere near Ivan Lopez?
Yeah, like half an hour with the car, like 50 kilometers away.
Oh, well, if you see him or you talk to him, please tell him, you know, thank you. And thank you for the Greach conference, and tell him I'm sorry. I should have probably brought him on for this one as well, you know, but we'll be sure to have him as a guest on a future podcast at some point.
Perfect.
And then Baruch, you as usual get the last word, whatever it is you want.
Yeah, so guys, thank you very much for the great job you do for the community, and we'll see you around.
That's it? You're going to be gracious after all this? You took such a...
Look, you know, after all this time, all the hard time we give you, dear Kotlin Can, I think I deserve a little bit of the beating myself. So we're all good.
Wow. I knew that was going to come up at some point. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. The podcast will be available this afternoon in at the usual places. Once again, thank you to the No Fluff Just Stuff conference for giving us a homepage at nofluffjuststuff.com/Groovy Podcast. You could see any of the old podcasts there or get access to the RSS feed if you want to go through iTunes or any other RSS reader. And we will talk to you again soon. So thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.